of the African and African diaspora film landscape with the African Union, Afrexim Bank, and the African Film Institute. So this is a discussion moderated by Tambay Obenson of Shadow and Act. And the guests are Vicensia Shule of the African Union, the Senior Cultural Officer, who will join us online. Viktor Ekoko Mukete of Afrexim Bank, who works in intra-African trade there. And we have with us live Terry J. Awase, producer and executive secretary of the African Film Institute. Welcome to Afro Berlin.
Thank you very much.
I have a boatload of questions. I was going to say shitload, but there might be kids in here, but I already said it anyway. I have a shitload of questions for you guys because I'm sure everyone needs answers that Afrexim Bank and the AU and AFI can hopefully provide in terms of, I guess what we can say broadly is sort of the state of African cinema broadly. I mean, we're talking industries, not just one industry, right? So we tend to think of just an African film industry, but there's several African film industries, some more mature than others. So I'm going to first ask each of you to demystify what each of your organizations does. Look, we know what the AU is. We know it. I think we know what the AU is. So maybe I should not assume. And we also know Afrexim Bank, what Afrexim Bank does broadly. I'm not as familiar with the AFI, so you'd have to clue me in on that as well. So if we can start with Afrexim Bank, simplify, just what does the Afrexim Bank do? Why does it exist? And then maybe then get more specific in terms of its involvement in African creative sectors.
Well, thanks for that. I'm still trying to make sure everybody can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Viktor Mukete. Thank you for the introduction. I'm representing the bank's Intra-Africa Trade Initiative team, under which CANEX, which houses our CANEX program, which essentially represents all of our creative industry endeavors. But maybe I'll just start with a broad overview on Afrexim. We're a development finance institution that was created under the auspices of the African Development Bank. We've been in operation for 31 years. And you may ask yourself, why is a trade finance institution supporting the creative industries? Well, going back to the genesis of why we were created was to impact development, and particularly to impact trade and industrialization, right? And I think if you're going to target those sectors, and there's certain demographics that you're going to target, large demographics of youth and women, you can't ignore the creative industries. And I guess it's under that auspices and mandates that we decided to launch CANEX. The numbers speak for themselves. It's 1.4 billion people on the continent. We have the youngest continent, and thus the marketing opportunity, the consumer opportunity exists. And even just by the numbers, even just the distribution opportunity, the film distribution opportunity on the continent, you have over 700,000 people to one screen, right? So we do recognize that there is a need for finance here. And it's under that mandate that we launched CANEX. Now, CANEX itself, it's a multi-pronged program. It is only financing. It captures a lot. So one of the many pillars is financing. But alongside that is policy advocacy, development of digital products, capacity building, and research and trade reports. So that's a broad overview. What we decided to do under CANEX also is, specifically when it comes to financing, is distill from what we've done traditionally in corporate finance to try to cater to the creative industries. So while we don't play in every single creative sector, we recognize that there are some industries with value chains where there are buyers and sellers where you can come in, and film is one of those. So we have a film finance development program, a music finance development program. We have a fashion development program where we've taken fashion designers over to walk the fashion broadways of the world, right? Off the back of which many of them do get purchase orders from, the likes of global retail outlets, Selfridges, Saks Fifth, off the back of which we look to finance. So that's just a high level.
In terms of let's say film and television specifically, it seems like maybe CanX is kind of a flagship, you could say, product, quote unquote. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
We'll come back to this, but I just want to at least put it in your head. I'm sure you're expecting this question, which is the $1 billion film fund that was announced in November. I'm sure everybody wants to know what's going on with that. I certainly do. So just think about that. I'm sure you have some answers already prepared, but we're going to probe that a little bit and we'll come back to that. So thank you for the response. Vicensia, if you can answer that question as well. We can't hear you.
We can't hear her.
We can't hear her. Is that on her end or is that ours?
She's in mid.
Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
super. Okay. Broadly, African Union is the union of the 55 member states, and it took over in 2002 from the OAU, the liberation movement. But now currently the institution is dealing with the issues related to the member states, which are 55 member states. Within the African Union, because we are organized in terms of issues, peace and security, health, humanitarian affairs, infrastructure, development, etc., we have a division of culture and sport, where film sits. It is within the health, humanitarian affairs, and social development department. And this division deals not only with arts, culture, and heritage, but with creative industries, where the film industry lies as well. We have established and we signed a host agreement with a temporary secretary host country, which is Kenya, to establish the African Audiovisual and Cinema Commission. This was done last year in February during the summit in Addis Ababa. And this is a journey of 20 years, which started in Maputo in 2003, where the filmmakers felt that they need an institution which will support the growth, the development, the investment, and also in terms of facilitating knowledge sharing and skills development as well. So African Audiovisual and Cinema Commission came up as that demand. So we have a lot of initiatives we have in the film industry, but they were not centralized. And since we are a policy institution at the headquarters in Addis Ababa, where I am, we are mostly developing policies to support the film industry, to support the creative sectors. But now with the coming in of the African Audiovisual and Cinema Commission, then that institution, which will be the temporary secretariat, will be situated in Kenya, and we hope to launch it maybe next month. It will be a supporting arm of the African Union in terms of implementing projects at the community level or at the member state level or at the regional level. Let me stop there.
Okay, no, that was good. Another question that I want you to think about as well that we're going to come back to is how I know that there are areas where the AU and Afrexim collaborate, correct? So yes, thank you. I was hoping that somebody would agree that there are areas because that's what I assume, that there are areas where both organizations collaborate in terms of creative sectors anyway. So I'll have questions about that too. So just to let you know that. African Film Institute, like I said, I'm not as familiar, so this will be an education for me as well. So go ahead.
Okay. So I'll ask you a question. You want the paper version or the real version? I'm joking with you. So
I want whatever the truth is. That's
yes, what the truth is. So African Film Institute is an initiative. It will shock you that was conceived in Europe when Africans, filmmakers and practitioners in the cultural space met with the AU, Copenhagen, Denmark. And then we thought that, look, like what the prof, by the way, the person from the AU is Professor Dr. Vicensia. I like to put the title together. So when we met with the AU, there's a lot of gaps.
Do we know that?
Yes. So there are gaps in how individuals can make things happen as Africans. You try to look for your representation and all of that, and then the prof just told you that it's about policies. When it comes to implementing things, let stuff be done. That's where the issue is, And so there was need for an institute to be able to have linkages with the likes of AfriNexim and all of that, and that's where the African Film Institute came up. And the AU gave a mandate that, look, it needs to have representation from all 7 zones. So people think there are only 6 zones of Africa: North, Central, South, East, and West. There's a 7th zone called the Africans in Diaspora, like the guys from, here and all that. So, yeah. So before it was established, we had to put representation from all of these zones together and then submit a registration in one of the member states so that the AU can then agree to work with such an agency to implement stuff. And the reason why AfriNexim is here and the AU is still because of the African Film Institute. When we were talking with the organizers, please, I think you should put your hands together for Madam Prudence and her gang. Like, there was, they were so tenacious that they didn't understand how the politics go, how you bring these guys to the table. Mr. Viktor is there, like a whole lot of people, AfriNexim, they need to come through, you understand? And the prof would understand we started disturbing her during Christmas and all of that they need AfriNexim on this Afro Berlin and all of that. So this is what we do. We try to bring them so that all your questions will go to the right persons. You understand? So the African Film Institute works with something, an acronym we call the IDEA, for I being for innovation, D for diplomacy, E for education, A for advancement, and S for strategy. So ideas. For instance, in our educational arrangements, we feel like this is something we've gone on about 8 diplomatic missions, with the help of the AU and other partners, to discover that there's a short gap. Most of the prominent filmmakers in Africa, whether on the continent or not, including myself, our knowledge of film is abroad. I did a film school in Nigeria, but then most of us have studied more in France, in Belgium, in Germany. And how you are taught determines how you tell stories. Nobody can run away from that. I know some of my brothers from here, Burkina Faso and all of that. So when you tell a man to tell his story, we have become our stories. And it's just that like the gentleman that sat here, the actor that lives here in Berlin, was saying that we've been programmed to do these things in certain ways. So one of the mandates for African Film Institute in terms of education is to try to see that people tell it with their senses, meaning the kind of trainings we bring, we call them innovative trainings, where an executive can take a course for just 7 weeks. Because first, he doesn't have the time to go back to school to learn how to be the African filmmaker. Sometimes he just wants to understand marketing so he can explain to the president of a country, like they were saying from the German corporation. How do you convince a cultural minister that film is good? I'll give an example of Nigeria. Nigeria started losing oil back some time, and then they were looking for another sector that could bring in up to $1 billion. And they discovered in all of the sector, agriculture and oil, it was only film and cultural stuff, film, fashion, music, that brought in $1 billion in GDP. Yeah. And that made a good case when the African Film Institute with the AU started talking with the government. We tell them, look, this is a sector that can be more elaborate. We've taken it to Seychelles. We've discussed with the guys in Zanzibar, Tanzania, Morocco, and this is where we're coming. There's a lot of politics, like most people here have said. Africa runs with a lot of governments are like dictatorial, you understand? And the people that seek to fight back to them, like the director from Italy, are filmmakers. And some cannot even stay back in their countries because they've spoken too much. Lionel will understand. You have done films where they say, if we see you, you will be shot. You understand? Mm-hmm. So the institute seeks to work with the big players. That's why we're housed with the AU.
So what are, do you have the three of you? Go ahead. Where to begin with all of that? I would say, I'm not even going to look at the questions much. Oops, where did she go? Hopefully she's coming back. Have the three of you had any real sort of tete-a-tetes, like conversations about the three S's? Yes.
Yeah.
In terms of how we move forward, because here's the thing with environments like this. So I've done so many panels. And the conversation never moves beyond the conversation. It stays in a conversation. We repeat ourselves. We're standing, like I say, I like to say, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. You know, we can talk until we're blue in the face.
Yes.
But what happens next?
Yeah.
So we walk out of here, and everybody walks out of here. I'm sure there's filmmakers, there's producers, there's actors, there's financiers. Whatever. What is? I mean, I'm fast forwarding to the end of the conversation, but we'll come back. But what is the takeaway when they walk out of here? What is it that you want them to get?
I'll tell you. That's the reason they're here. We came up with an initiative. I don't know, Prof is still there. I can't see her video. Last year, after the summit, we were talking and we said some of our about 3 years of work. Somebody referenced the work by UNESCO. Was so difficult. You know, they wanted to do a research to bring some data together about Africa, the potentials of the film industries. So now this meeting for us as three entities is called the Common African Film Market Initiative. CAFMI, if you want to call it like that. So since last year, we're able to get, I think some of the people in the room here, we just got people from the 7 zones again that tell us, because there are 3 tiers of film, which filmmakers will agree, the creative side, the technical production side, then the market, or whatever, the post. That is the, permit my French, but the beach of it, if you're in this thing. You do a film, very creative, and now it can't be seen, it can't be sold, you will not do films again. This has been the story of a lot of African filmmakers. The ending side of it, the post, the selling, the market.
Not the financing side.
The financing is still there. That's what it's it. For great films, they already assure the finances in terms of funding and selling before they even start, right? So that is why we're 3 here together.
Wait a minute.
I don't know. I need to take it home so you can ask the question.
Okay.
I want to take it home.
Okay, do that.
Okay, good.
Yes.
So, it's been a whole lot. I want to cut you out of the politics and the whole of because Prof here and Mr. Viktor are aware of that. It's been a long time coming. But for the first time, and that's why this is important for us, for the first time, this is being implemented right before your eyes. AfriNexim has agreed to come together to sit here. AU is sitting here, African Film Institute, so that we will give credible reports and that this has taken up. Our first thing on the agenda, the productive material you're going to get, is a database, which is not only a problem in just the film and cultural sector. It's a black hole in Africa. When you want to say how many people in Cameroon do this, problem. How many people in Nigeria, they'll give you a list, you discover it's upside down. I don't know if you understand. So we want to build a credible
Transparency.
Database. So that investors and all of the guys that want to reach African marketers, producers know where to go. AfriNexim, AU, it will house a hub where you can get the database that is authentic. You know, that's one of the products of the meetings where...
That's good.
Yeah. And so this is real. The prof there doesn't like things that have to do with, like what you're saying, where you talk. She said it has been 20 years before we're considering to sign an implementing agency. 20 years. You understand? So these are the kind of things we want to do. This is practical, and that is what you're seeing here. And that's why the AfriNexim is here. That's why the AU is here. That's why the AFI is here for us. That's why we'll collect all your database, the 7th zone, and the guys on the continent, so that we'll have something practical to work with.
Do our 2 virtual guests, have anything to add to that, or has Terry pretty much encapsulated your thoughts? Ladies first.
When you say ladies, you mean me? I'll be so happy.
Yes. Yes. When I say ladies first, yes, I mean you. Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, as Terry as said, and Viktor, we have to implement, because when we go to meetings and we meet the filmmakers, they always tell us we don't eat policies, we don't eat those legal instruments you're developing. We need investment. We need to build our capital. We need to extend our markets. We need really to take out the content we have in Africa and sell it to the world. The way we sell gold, tanzanite, diamond, etc., because we know content is the current gold. So our initiative with Afrexim is because we believe Afrexim as a financial institution will provide African Union a financial backup in the implementation of the project, which not only will impact individual filmmakers, but the member state will benefit. So we're trying to come up with a project, as Terry said, just to understand who are the producers. Because when it comes to film industries and production, producers are the people whom they make things happen. So we want to know, we might have hundreds of thousands of actors, but if we don't have strong producers who can access facilities to mount productions, which will bring changes to the world, not only by having awards, because having award for the content is one thing, but having children going to school, better school, for the actors and the crew members in the production in Africa is very important. So to improve the livelihood of the filmmakers is more important at the current situation than anything else. Thank you.
In terms of coming up with these elements and putting these thoughts into practice and materializing these ideas, how much do you engage governments themselves, individual African governments? Well, maybe we'll go to Viktor since let Viktor answer this one. How much? Yeah, I guess this is actually a good question for Afrexim. I mean, how much do you engage with individual countries? Is there any engagement at all? And maybe even how much input do you have in terms of how a country decides how to evolve, we could say, its own creative sector? Is there any engagement at all, any communication between you and the respective governments?
In African governments, no, not as much. We are a private sector-led institution. We do provide financing to the sector. Our whole goal is to partner with institutions like the African Union and the African Film Institute, through which is typically our vehicles, the vehicles that we use to access, to speak with government entities. I don't think there isn't. Okay, because this eventually leads to something that I actually wanted to speak on. Because of my brother Terry there mentioned something quite interesting about, I think what Terry was getting at was the ecosystem that we're trying to build on the continent for film, for filmmakers to actually make a living from film and also develop it as an industry. If I can just interrupt Viktor just very quickly. So really this database, if you can call it, when you're talking about ecosystems, I'm just trying to paint a sort of broad picture, 30,000, 80,000 foot view of this. This is just one piece that has come out of your respective conversations. And there will be further elements, some other ideas that are going to be put into practice beyond the database, whether it's in financing, whether it's in infrastructure, whether it's in... Okay, go ahead. Of course. No, absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. Because listen, like when you talk about the ecosystem on the continent, development of the film industry, there's a whole host of things, right? I mean, for us, we recognize our financing is essential, right? And creating flexible sources of funding. We're primarily debt financiers, but that's why we've also launched an equity fund to finance the creative industries. Because as you know, the markets on the continent, while it's a legacy market in terms of its ideas, it's very nascent in terms of its infrastructure, right? We need to grow the range of service providers to the industry. There are a lot of makers, there are a lot of ideas, but we need to grow the range of distributors, the range of movie theaters, the range of P&A professionals. Those are the areas that we need to target, because what he was referencing in terms of filmmakers, they make movies and they're not able to get any distribution. you're essentially, we live in a buyer's market. There are many, many filmmakers, very few buyers, and unfortunately, many of us are at the hands of Netflix and Amazon and the like, right? If we're actually going to make a profit from our project. But it would be great if you had indigenous African platforms that could leverage the numbers. And there's no reason why you can't leverage the numbers. There's 1.4 billion people. There's no reason why you can't leverage the numbers, but you do need to grow the infrastructure around the films. The ideas are there, the IP is there, but it's the infrastructure around it, which must be accompanied by policy. For example, tax credits. You've seen what tax credits has done with South Africa. You've seen what it's done with Morocco. I think if a place like Nigeria, if it did have, because as much as Nollywood, and I do think as much as Nollywood has grown and has grown to be a very competitive industry, Nigerian filmmakers are some of the toughest filmmakers on the continent because, you have to be a guerrilla filmmaker to make a film in Africa, and especially in very, very difficult markets where you're trying to navigate police, you're trying to navigate, you're trying to navigate licenses where there isn't any infrastructure. You're basically given the camera and say, run, right? And so you're told to shoot. Now, for us, also as a financier, I'll tell you, it's much easier when there's a tax credit that's there, that's easy for me to cash flow. And then maybe there's an equity investor here. Okay, I can come in and give my 70% debt. And then there's a distributor for it, right? There's that design around developed markets. But in Africa, we still need to grow the infrastructure around this. So while financing IP is one thing, for us, what's also key is financing the other service providers around the IP, because I feel like that's what's going to enable the leapfrogging of the industry.
So speaking of ecosystems, so okay, let's do a case study. I'm a filmmaker. I have a script. It's done, and there's the ecosystem. There is there these road stops that that have come out of these conversations between these three organizations. So I'm in Nigeria. At what point do I even begin to engage with the AFI, and then Afrexim possibly, and then even the AU?
Yes, so I would add this with the question you asked, that how do we relate with the government? So we are in a unique position as the African Film Institute, right? Our appointments and the way we run stuff, we do not have some of the bureaucracies that will make things not happen. That is where the likes of Prof and are happy at the AU, because at the AU level, you need 15 countries to ratify a meeting that must happen during the summit, so that then we sit and sign, and then yay and nay, and then it doesn't happen. We don't have that. We were in Seychelles. Where's the president at? We don't need, it's not the president, it's the Minister of Culture. We're talking with the guy. Who are the guys that do film? It's not on paper. We want to see them. We'll go to the studios. We've engaged governments. I mentioned some countries here. We have been to these countries, Burkina Faso, and we like to go to the government, because I think the person from the German Corporation said it, especially in Africa. If you think an initiative like that of film and culture will succeed without the government, you're joking. Yes, you understand? So bringing it home to Nigeria, which is a tough, I understand. Niger, it's an interesting country, and I have personal relationships, so I understand Nigeria. If you were to make things happen in Nigeria, so I might switch to the accent. So my Oga here, you will need to know an Oga that will make a call to another Oga. For instance, I was directing something at the airport in Nigeria, right? And then for 2 weeks, we're trying to fly a drone. It wasn't working. They wouldn't even let us that we need to go to National Security Advisor to give the clearance to fly a drone, to film, for an airport that's owned by the government. Then a guy came in slippers, and then we spoke a language he understands in Hausa, and then it's a tribe. And he said, why NSA doing? Like, who is NSA? They should call him. He's trying to do something here at the airport in the night. And the next thing he says, son, do whatever you want in this airport. I have said so. And that was the end of the conversation. So you need to understand the culture of Africa. There's the eldership and leadership and all of that. So for us as an organization, that's why we're telling a lot of people here, I've heard a lot of good initiatives here. We understand the politics and the practicality. So you come to us, we know who we know, the Oga or the Poli. The person we need to touch. We have already done that. like an assignment as a group. So what we do for you is connect you with the side you might disrespect. It's not because your initiative is not good. It's because you disrespected the elder statesman by not saying hi to him before landing. So we make sure you don't make that mistake. You understand? A lot of initiatives have failed in the African continent because of just this. Somebody was not greeted. Somebody, doesn't like the color of the skin of this guy.
So let me
So we take away all of
that. Why is that funny? Things fall apart, right? Things fall apart. So yes, you're preaching to the choir. I'm sure there are people in here who maybe they're not familiar, but if you're not familiar, then I think he's just kind of giving you an idea. But I think a lot of Africans here kind of know how this shit works, right? Yeah. So you were getting to something that, and I'm going a little bit off tangent here, and I want to come back to the financing stuff. But,
okay.
But in terms of recently, we know that Amazon pulled out, and I know Prudence want to make sure I brought this up. Amazon, they didn't pull out, but they scaled back their investments. Yeah. I will say, just aside, that I've always, no, maybe I won't say it. I may need money from Amazon or something at some point, so no. They scaled back, so I always looked at those initiatives with Netflix and Amazon in Africa with some caution anyway. I wasn't as enthusiastic as I think a lot of Africans were, but I also recognize that I am not an African in Africa. I'm an African who lives in the United States, and so I'm afforded a certain amounts of privileges. You could say that if I were living in Nigeria, I may not be able to say the things I can say and do the things I can do. So that said, I think I want to hear you in terms of just the lack of awareness, the lack of understanding of these cultural elements. When an Amazon and a Netflix come into these countries, and it seems like they have African representation. They hire Africans, they hire Nigerians, they hire South Africans. They might be living in, let's say, Amsterdam or something, but they should be hiring people who have an understanding of these issues, right? Yeah. So, that's a question. The first question. Then, secondly, if they don't have an understanding, why not? Like, at what point do they come into these countries and then set up shop so really sort of freely and not have people in place to educate them in terms of how the shit really works? Okay, good stuff. You understand your tough, and this is why there's an institution. So good stuff. In Africa, it's because of such kind of disorganized, I don't want to call it unprofessional because I go to movie sets. So when they start throwing around the word professional set, they're about to insult somebody. Well, let's be professionals here. Then the other guy is about to insult the other guy. So there's a disorganized way of doing business on the African continent. They've done that with oil. They've done it with cobalt. They've done it with all kinds of things and gone away with it. And now it entered culture. Except that culture leaves a print of imagery. When you take the product, you change the man. That is the issue with film and storytelling. They impact people to generations yet unborn. And it's that important. So most of the big entities you've called came to Africa, and like we said, they went through the back channels, don't pay tax. Let's just get a guy that can make sure we get our 20 films shot even during COVID when you can't shoot anywhere else in the world. In Nigeria, yes, you can still shoot it because maybe there's no order, but I just need my content to show. I'm not mentioning names, but you are in this stuff, you should understand. So most of the big players came to Africa, did disorganized businesses, and that's why some are pulling out. Because they put their money in a con man hand and then they got conned, right? That's what just happened. So that is why there's an institution. We interface with guys with integrity. African Exim will check the documents. They will want certain things signed. They need to understand that AU is part of this so that you do things orderly. You respect. African Union has a whole charter for culture that is so complete. You understand? Which countries have signed to? The Charter for Culture. These are things people need to know. So our advice for people coming onto the continent, deal with good structures. Try not to do the businesses behind. Right now, in terms of streaming, there's an ongoing war with some of the big countries about how they are not getting tax enumeration and they don't have control over the guys because the office is in Amsterdam and they stream and do whatever they want on the continent except you can't hold them back.
I don't know if you understand.
Yes.
So, and that's where we get involved now, because sooner or later, the guy that neglected the organized structure now comes to you. How do we get past this? Because we need to talk to the orga. You see?
And that's partly why I asked the question about engagement with governments and leadership within the countries themselves, because there has to be some kind of structure. There has to be. I mean, it doesn't have to be Afrexim. It doesn't have to be AU. This is why I asked initially each of you to demystify the organizations, because I mean, I have an idea of what each one does, but I also don't really know what each one really does on a sort of regular basis. Because and it's not an accusation of anything, by the way, just to make that clear. But I think just having some understanding, really specific understanding of what each one does, then at least then we know, we understand. We just kind of have more information, and then we, as filmmakers anyway, I'm not a filmmaker, but as filmmakers, we kind of know who we should be speaking to and who we should be dealing with. And people ask me questions all the time on Twitter about this, and I say I'm not the expert on what the AU does. I'm not the expert on what Afrexim Bank does. So I will go back to Viktor and ask the question about this the $1 billion fund, and I get questions about that. I mean, people have been asking me about that since it was announced in November, man. So I'm going to give you the floor to answer these questions. Specifically, when will it be launched? Officially, when is it official? How is it going to operate? I mean, I'm sure there are conversations being had about how this is going to work, how it's going to be dispersed, and I think we need to understand that Afrexim Bank does have the word bank in it. So these are not grants, right? These are more like loans and investments. It is a private organization, so you're not just giving money away. You're expecting something in return. And I think filmmakers don't quite understand that either. So really, again, I'm going to use the word demystify. If you can demystify for us what exactly this fund is and how it will operate, et cetera, as succinctly as you can.
Sure. Thanks for that question. Very important. So currently, well, to answer the question about the fund first, it's an equity fund. And we've traditionally had a debt finance product that had a limit of $1 billion. But that was debt primarily. And that was not only just targeted towards content, it was targeted towards the whole film ecosystem. So in our pipeline right now, we have content projects as well as studio projects across the continent. Now, with the fund, what we've realized as a debt financier, especially when you're trying to grow a creative, the industry that's relatively nascent, you need patience money, right? You can't apply debt maybe too aggressive for certain filmmakers, not all filmmakers, but certain filmmakers. And that's certainly been the case. There's definitely going to be a case of trial and error when you're doing financing for films in a place where nobody's ever done financing for films competitively. So, what that showed us was that there was a need for flexible sources of funding. When you broke down budgets of some independent films, because that's typically what we're doing. We're operating in an independent film environment, so we grow companies to be full-fledged studios, which we believe will be the case. When you look at independent films done anywhere else in the world successfully, there's a mix of funding, right? You have private equity money here, you have debt here that's backed by maybe some tax credits, you have some grants here. There's a very peculiar funding mix that goes into a budget. That goes into a $5 million budget, even $1 million budget. It's not just debt, right? So for us, it was giving us the flexibility to at least diversify the sources of funding to support filmmakers. Now, as you can imagine, when you announce something like this, there do need to be some barriers to entry to accessing that. And typically, as is the case currently with our current program, it will be for filmmakers that at least have demonstrated that they've been able to make films and at least deliver films, right? Because when you're financing a movie, it isn't so much company risk you're looking at, it's performance risk a lot of the time that you're looking at, right? Obviously, it's great if there's a corporate there, but then performance risk is what dictates our risk thresholds in terms of going forth with it. So it's $1 billion fund. It will be launched at the very, very, very earliest Q4 this year. it's something that we're going to be seeding with, I believe, about $200 million of our money as general partners, and 800 million would be seeded from other LPs. But that would be launched at the very, very earliest towards the end of this year. And it wouldn't be something that we would finance. The goal is, to finance filmmakers on the continent, African filmmakers in the diaspora as well, who are willing to do co-productions with filmmakers on the continent, because that's our key market, obviously. And also there's the opportunity for us to potentially even do mezzanine funding, where we also add debt as well as do the equity, right? But what's key is, and I must emphasize this, that, our goal in doing this, as well as to grow the film industries, is to grow knowledge about how to finance these sectors. Because it's one thing for Afrexim to do this. It's another thing for a filmmaker in Nigeria to be able to go to Access Bank to get this kind of facility. Another thing for a Kenyan filmmaker to go to, KCB to get this kind of facility, right? So it's to create that model that can then be now cascaded down to your local filmmakers in these local markets who need who need funding for, say, $500,000 to make a film, because that would be a really low threshold for us, right? So that's fundamentally the difference.
Go ahead. I'm told that we're running out of time, and that's too bad. Okay, so I was going to take a follow-up question. I guess last question for everyone would be then, okay, so that the information, I'm sorry, I'm going to go over. The information that you just gave, that is not information that's out there, correct? This is because I haven't seen it anywhere. Is that accurate?
Yes, it's not information that's out there.
Okay. Oh, look at that, guys. You're learning something new. Okay, great. So earliest Q4 is when it can be expected. But in terms of the actual implementation of it, how filmmakers can apply, et cetera, that'll come, I guess, eventually when this is launched. Essentially, yes. Okay. So final question for everybody. So what are you going to do once you hang up? Ladies first. What did you Professor Mrs.?
Professor the Doctor.
Professor Doctor. What are you going to do?
Oh, of course, we keep going. We were going to launch the African Audiovisual Cinema Commission this March, and of course, trying to make sure that our people in the continent, the filmmakers who distribute the film, who produce the films, at least we distribute to the profitable manner, because production is one thing, but distribution, because I think what we see in most of the main distribution platforms, I think is less than 10% of what is produced in Africa. It's the same as we do produce a lot of coffee, but what goes out to the market, or tomatoes, what goes out to the market is less than what we produce, because the rest get lost across the value chain. So we're trying to increase the percentage of the productions to reach the market, but not only reach the market, but be profitable to those who are doing it. So we appreciate that we have Afrexim implementing the Film Fund idea, because Film Fund has been a dream for many filmmakers in the continent, and it's central to the African Audiovisual Cinema Commission. It was its mandate. So we appreciate that Afrexim is implementing on behalf of the continent this great idea of having a film fund. So from here, yes, we keep on going. Maybe in the coming few years, we'll be more implementing than writing documents. I'm not sure, but perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have to close.
Oh, come on. One more. Who's that? Was that Prudence?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, Prudence is spoken, so I have to shut up now. Thanks. Thanks, Victor. Thanks, Professor Doctor. And thank you, Terry, for joining us. I appreciate it. So thank you very much. I hope this was informative.
Yeah. So for me, I'm on ground. I'm not going to hang up. I'm just going to drop the mic and still be with you. We will help you get across, to wherever you wanted to get across to. That's why we're here on ground. Thank you.